Hello and welcome to Handmade Originals, the YouTube channel where I tackle a whole range of creative projects in the hope of giving you confidence and hopefully a bit of inspiration to have a go yourself. Now, we're in wedding season. In my last video I dealt with how to make some garters, and in this video I'm going to deal with how to make a fascinator. And I'm going to show you how to make this a fascinator, although obviously this is just an example of what you can do, and as I said in the introduction, I hope that this will just give you some ideas and try something for yourself. You'll be amazed at actually how straightforward it is once you know how. Whatever you're building, whether it's a house or a fascinator, you have to start with the correct foundations. And so what I'm using as a foundation for this is a covered hairband, which I've just got off the internet. I think I got it from Amazon, but I'll have a look back and put the link down below. And the reason I chose this was because it's covered, let me just show you, it's covered in fabric, but it's not completely glued down. This fabric is actually loose so that I can put a needle through it. I know that's a pin, but I can put a needle through it, which means I can then stitch things onto it. So that is the foundation of the fascinator. Now, this fascinator is for my mother, for a wedding that we're going to. I've already made her wear this, not the head, just the fascinator, just the headband, for the afternoon, just to make sure it's not too tight and is going to be comfortable on her, because the worst thing is you wear a hat and you're forever fiddling with it because it's loose or it's wobbly or it's too tight, pinching your head, giving you a headache. So it has to be comfortable, and therefore it has to be balanced and it has to be light on your head. So you put it on, think you look fabulous when you look in the mirror, and then you forget about it. That is the best sort of setting. So having said all that, the first thing I'm going to do is to show you how to make this really pretty flower, which is going to go here. Right. So the first thing you need is to cut yourself a template, and I've just roughly drawn out a flower shape here. I always prefer 5 petals or 7 petals rather than even numbers. They just look better, I think. So this is my template. I'm just going to quickly cut round this. You don't have to be too exact, and you'll see why later on. Actually, when I did the other flower, I literally just eyeballed it and cut it round, whereas with this I'm going to show you how easy it is with a template, because you've actually got some guidelines until you're more confident in what you're doing. Also, if you want to, you can make the petals a completely different shape. I would suggest, if you want to make something which is truly like a real flower, then go through a gardening book, have a look at the shape of the petals and copy that. It's called biomimicry. It's actually a thing, and what it means is copying nature, because very often nature, through evolution, has tried everything, and what you see these now surviving is the best version. There, right, so now I'm going to take my pins out. Right, I'm going to give you a little confession here. I wanted to give this some movement. This is organza I'm using, which is lovely because it's very light. It catches the light. I don't know if you can see it sort of changes colour when the light hits it, which is fabulous. And it's sort of quite malleable, but it's got sufficient body that it sort of will hold its shape. Now, what I initially started to do was, I'll show you these rather ghastly little bits. I thought to give it some texture, I would try putting it under a hot iron and slightly scorching it, and these are the results. It did actually, I think, look quite interesting, but it wasn't sufficiently uniform to give me something that would end up looking like a flower. So what I did was something much more straightforward, which was this. Just with this organza, you just scrunch it up in your hand, and look, and when you put it down, you see it's got all sorts of texture, and it just, with all the little bumps in it, there's always a part of it which will catch the light. So I'm quite pleased with that as a texture, but I decided I wanted more. So this is what I decided to do. I'll put this one here so you can see what we're aiming for. So having discarded all my scorched little, I've got the wrong colour t-shirt on here, you can't see. Having discarded all my scorched little bits, I thought, well, I still quite like this sort of edging here. You can see it looks like a little bit of black charring on the edges, and what I ended up doing eventually, although I did experiment with several matches, what I finally worked out as the best way to do it was to use a candle. Now, if you're going to use a candle, a bit of health and safety here, always have a bowl of water right next to you, so that if you set fire to a piece of fabric, you can just throw it in the water and you don't set fire to your house and burn it down. Right, having said that, you don't put it in the flame anyway, you literally put it just above the flame, and it's only the very edge that you want to just heat. Now if you just look, you see it just curls, just chars a little bit. The best way to do it, as you can see, I'm going to I've put some white paper here in the hope that this makes it easier to see what I'm doing. Right, I'm just going to, if you stand over it, you get a much clearer view of what it is you're doing. Don't put the fabric in the flame. You literally just put it above the flame and it will just, you see, just take off the edge like that. So I'll carry on doing this so you can, in case it wasn't clear the first time, you just take it around. It takes all the little frondy bits off and also just makes it curl up a little bit, give it a bit more texture. And the charred edge I really like because it's a bit like outlining a drawing or something. And I think when you've gone to you will go to a lot of trouble putting this flower together, it's quite nice to just have your work highlighted with a sort of black charred edge. And don't worry if it's sort of a little bit uneven, doesn't matter, just adds to the sort of natural look of it. And I think looks very pretty. Obviously you decide what you want to do. You could just leave them cut edges if that's what you prefer. Right, if you fancy a cup of tea, always blow your candle out. Never, ever, ever leave a candle unattended. Now, if I hold this up against this piece of paper, I hope it's clear. You can see just little bits of black edges here. All right, so let's carry on. I'm going to put that there because I think it's easier to see against white paper. Here are some I have prepared earlier. And I'm going to layer all of these, starting obviously with the biggest one at the bottom and working up, it's quite tatty so that one doesn't want to be on top, working up to the smallest one, which I think is the one I've just done on the top. Right, I'm going to also just rough that up a little bit more. Right. Now, before I put them together, I don't know if you can see from this one here, I've actually included a little bit of net, 2 layers up. And that's not flat net, that is net which I've cupped, and I'll show you what I mean. And that's to give it just a little bit of body and a little bit of lift. If you can see sideways on, it just gives it a little bit more of a 3D effect. Right, so cut yourself a circle of net, which is quite nice and firm, don't get floppy net, and then literally all you do is you just make a slit, my t-shirt's in there, you make a slit like this, and then you're going to just put it across like that. So what you end up with is a very shallow little cone. So I'm going to sew that together. I'm just going to do that by hand, and then I'll come back and show you what I'm going to do with it. Now, I've sewn my little pointy dome, and I'm going to put that in between the second and third layer coming up. Some of these are a bit tatty because this is the fabric which I scorched with the iron, which was an idea but wasn't brilliant. But I'm just going to pop those underneath so they won't show, but they will give the flower a bit of body. So this is my bottom layer here. I'm going to put this on top. And when you put the layers of petals on, just turn them so that each petal covers the gap in the previous layer. Otherwise they're just going to all stack, aren't they? Right, so I've left this attached because I'm just going to pop that on here. I don't want to keep starting new threads because the more threads you start and stop, the more likely you have an option, the more likely it is that something's going to come undone. So I'm just keeping this all together. I'm just going to secure this. I'm going to leave the thread long, and I'll show you in a moment why. Right, that's it. Now, can you see we've got a sort of little cup-like thing there, and all that's going to do is just lift the layers above it so that you get that nice shape. So I'm just going to pop this on top, going up in size, tatty ones further down so they're not as visible, I think, and making sure you turn your petals to cover the ones underneath. Right, that's all nicely layered. Now I'm going to just secure all of these together. Now, can you see that when this is sewn down, and it will be sewn down in the middle, that the petals will lift slightly because you've put the net underneath, and also because each of the petals now has quite a bit of texture to it where I've crumpled everything. The next thing I'm going to do is sew some beads in here. And here we are. This is the one I've done earlier, and this is one I've just done now. Let me just show you the beading. I've actually put in 2 different sizes of bead here because I just think it looks that bit more interesting and prettier. It gives it more of a 3D effect. I've also just gone round and tidied up some of the petals and scorched a few more on the edges. I would just point out you have to be super careful when you're doing this. This is organza, which is why it melts. It won't work with natural fabrics like cotton or silk because it's the plasticky fibres in this polyester or whatever that actually kind of shrink back, and that's why you get that effect. So you need to be careful when choosing your fabric. Just test it on a match first, and please be careful, especially if you're someone that wears hairspray, because if you lean over, your hair could catch fire. So tie your hair back, cover it up, just be super careful. But anyway, if you do manage to leap over all of those hurdles, I just think it comes out looking so pretty. Right, those are the flowers. Now we're going to move on to the leaves. I had several different possibilities for leaves. This was one which is just taken from an artificial flower, which actually looks really nice, the depth of colour with that dark red, but it doesn't match what my mother's going to wear. So she's wearing something which has a much lighter green in it. So then I was thinking I could bleach some leaves, and I did, and that came up to that colour, but actually that is still too bright and too dark. So then I found this lovely lace, and I thought that would look really pretty as well. But deciding to make things difficult for myself, why not? I thought I would actually make my own leaves, and so the leaves which I've made, which I think will just look really pretty. I've wired them. I'm just going to quickly show you how I made them, but because I've wired them, I can also bend them into whichever shape I want, because basically what is a fascinator if not a little bit of fabric sculpture on your head? Right, let me show you how I made those leaves. so the first thing I've done, I've got a little bit of silk here. I don't know if you can see, but I've just drawn on there 3 leaf shapes. I did draw it with tailor's chalk, which I think you can just about see here, but I couldn't see that under the light, and I need to be able to see it to put it under the machine. So I've actually just used a pencil. And I'm going to put net over it. Right, then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a running stitch on the machine round these edges here, all the way around, and then I'll come back and show you what's next. I'm doing it so that the net is net side up while I'm putting it under the machine, because I don't want this snagging on the foot and being pulled under and damaging my machine. Right, and here it is. Can you see all the... I hope you can see that thread there. I've just stitched around those 3 shapes. Now, however tempted you might be, do not cut out those leaves yet, because it's much easier to deal with a big piece of fabric, or relatively big piece of fabric like this, rather than 3 tiny leaves. And the next stage is, it's a little bit fiddly. What you need is some craft wire, and what you're going to do is to put this, you're going to sew it in from the tip of the leaf down to the base of the leaf like that. So that is the backbone, if you like, of the leaf, and that's what we're going to use to bend the leaf. Right, so before you do that, so you need to cut about 1.5 times the length of the leaf. However tempted you might be, do not use your scissors, use some pliers. If you use your scissors, you run the risk of damaging your scissors. Right, now here's the tricky bit. It's not tricky really, it's just a bit fiddly. You thread from the tip of the leaf. If you do this, sort of ruffle it up so you separate the 2 layers, you thread from the tip of the leaf under the net, oh come on, and top of the silk, right, or whatever other fabric you're using. So that what you then have is a piece of wire running through, coming out at the top and coming out at the bottom. Now, with your fingernail, if you've got one, just carefully, can you see, bend over a little hook and make that really a teeny tiny hook. You can probably guess what you're going to do. A teeny tiny hook, and then carefully pull that through so that it hooks into the top of the net. Now, the next thing you're going to do is very carefully try and close that hook, and then you're going to zigzag over that wire so that it runs down the centre of the leaf like that. And because you've hooked it here, you should be able to zigzag down. You start at the top, do a double stitch over the hook, and then zigzag all the way down to here, and then you should have a little tail here so that you can tie it on to the other leaves. Now, I hope you can see here, I've zigzagged all the way down the back of the spine of the leaf. Here is my wire sticking out, and it stayed in place because I've got that little hook at the top, which I've now double stitched over. And if you look on the other side, you can see there's the shape of my leaf and the central spine of it. And the next thing I'm going to do is fold that in half so that the wire is right on the edge, and then starting at the tip, I'm going to straight stitch literally as close as I can get to the wire to make that groove down the back of the leaf. Right, I'm going to have a go at doing that, and then I'll come back. I don't start right at the tip because I want that to sort of unfurl and open up, so I'm going to start about 1/3 of the way down here. Now, we're nearly there. So let me show you closely. You can see I've got 3 leaves here. I've sewn round the edge of them here. I've inserted some wire down the back, and I've sewn as close as possible to the wire to give it that nice ridge on the front. And now, and only now, I'm going to cut about 1 millimetre away from that sewn edge all the way around, so then I'll have 3 separate leaves, but each leaf will have this wire stem continuing, so then I can wire them all together. So I'm going to cut them all out and then I'll show you how you can wire them all together. So here are my 3 leaves which I've now cut out. Put the biggest one in the middle, position the other ones so they're slightly lower. It looks a bit like a cannabis leaf, doesn't it? Except I think that's 5 leaves. Anyway, and then moving on, and then just twist all the wires together like that. You can then position them however you like, but they're easier to maneuver because they are actually wired together as a set of 3. Now, the next thing, and finally we've reached the really most entertaining, fun part. So I'm going to place the big flower first, and I think I want to put that here. I've got to do it facing me to start with, otherwise I'm going to put my left, right all over the place. I won't know what I'm doing. Right, so that's going to go there, let me show you, which I think will look very pretty. And then the smaller flower, I was thinking I would put slightly beneath it and a little bit further back. If you are making a lot of headdresses or fascinators, I strongly recommend you get one of these heads. It's so much easier just to pin it straight into the polystyrene rather than, obviously you wouldn't want to do that in someone's head. Right, so that's what I was thinking. So it looks really pretty from the side as well, and from the front and from the back. So now we need to put some leaves in. And I was thinking of putting a big leaf in kind of here. I quite like the way that just cascades a little bit over the forehead, and then I can tweak it. And then the little leaf which we've just made, I was thinking I could put just under here. Something like that. A little bit like that anyway. And again, you can sort of move those around to make it prettier. Right, so the other thing I was toying with the idea of doing, and this is the joy of having all these little bits you can play around with, is possibly putting a couple of leaves here, but I think that might be too much. It's that old adage, isn't it, that whenever you're worrying about whether you're overdressed, take off the last thing that you put on and then you'll be fine. So I think that will be super. Now, at the very beginning, you will remember we talked about, or I talked, and I'm afraid you had to listen, you have to have the correct foundations. Well, the sharp-eyed amongst you might notice that whereas I can sew these leaves onto the hairband, this flower here is further back from the hairband. So what I have to do is to put a little platform there, and I'm thinking I'm going to use some of this, which is horsehair braid. It's not actually made of horsehair, it used to be in the olden days, but it's actually sort of like fibre plastic, and it's used to go around the hem of long ball gowns and things like that to give it a nice shape. So I think what I might do is just sort of make a little platform like that, sew it on, and then sit that flower on this little platform. I'll show you when I've made the little platform so that you can see the underpinnings, as it were, and then I'm going to put it all together for you. Now, here you can see, I hope, that I have attached this horsehair braid, which is firm enough that it won't flap about, and it will form a nice foundation for the flower to be sewn on. I've sewn it on here, not in a very beautiful way, but that's going to be covered by the flower, so I'm not too bothered by that. And I think I'm even going to put a small amount, I don't like using glue, but I'm going to use a small amount of glue on here, because having cut across the horsehair braid, if I don't, it's quite likely to fray, and I just don't want that happening. I want this to stay put. If, and I understand it's a very niche thing, you don't have horsehair braid, what you can do, if you want to make an extra platform, is just get some ordinary net, fold it over several times so that it doesn't flap, and then you could use that, just attach that and use that as a platform. The only thing is to make sure that you anchor it from the front edge, so that all of this is ballast to hold this in place. If you just attach it to that edge, it will act like a hinge and flap around. So whatever you use, just make sure that it stays put and it's not going anywhere. Right, I'm going to put a tiny bit of glue, and then I'm going to put everything together, and then you can see the finished fascinator. And here it is, it's finished. I have to tell you, I am absolutely thrilled with it. I'll just show you what it looks like on. It's not actually for me, it's for my mother, who is in her 80s. So I think she'll be thrilled with it. She didn't. My only parameters were that she didn't want anything too high, so I think this fits the bill. Let me just show you the details. So we have some lovely beadwork at the centre. I've made it like this with the extra. I did put some extra leaves in at the back because now you can look at it from the front. If I stand here, you can see it rather than me. And then at the side, it still looks interesting. And at the back, it still looks interesting. You see this? You can bend the leaves around as you desire, and then the other side here, you still have a little bit to look at. So I'm really pleased with that. And as it happens, because I've put some leaves at the back, if you prefer, you can wear it that way around as well, whichever suits you better. So there we are. I hope you've been inspired by this, and you're eager now to go away and make your own and choose something that matches, rather than having to just make do with what's in the shop. You can actually match exactly what colours you have in your outfit or dress. Or trousers, if you're a man, if you fancy wearing a fascinator, why not? See you next time.